Before the extraordinary events of his life began, Yusuf was a young man with a pure heart, raised in a family filled with love and wisdom, unaware of the exceptional destiny awaiting him. And if you're ready, let's begin. Joseph was greatly loved by his father Jacob, and his brothers noticed the special place Joseph held in their father's heart. Jealousy began to torment their hearts, and envy bared its claws. The story begins when Joseph tells his father that he dreamed of 11 stars, the sun and the moon bowing down before him. Jacob asked his son not to tell the dream to his brothers, for it would only increase their resentment, hatred, and jealousy toward him. However, the news of the vision reached those envious brothers. They met in secret and discussed what to do, unanimously deciding to take Joseph and throw him into a deep well, to extinguish the fire of jealousy burning in their chests. After much discussion with their father, the loving parent agreed to send Joseph with his brothers to spend some time playing and having fun. The brothers then went out with Joseph to a remote place, determined to carry out their plan. When they reached a place where there was a deep well, they threw their brother into it without pity or mercy. Then they went back, taking Joseph's tunic with them, which they stained with blood to hide the truth about what had happened, and claimed that a fierce stray wolf had attacked and devoured their brother without them knowing. As soon as Jacob heard the story, he felt something was wrong. But what could he do with that evidence in his hands? Not enough to accuse the guilty? He entrusted his case to God, asking for patience in this terrible calamity. Then the Quranic scene shifts to tell us about Joseph, who was at the bottom of the well. While he was in that state, a caravan of merchants passed by, stopping near the well to rest and resupply with water and food. As soon as some men from the caravan lowered the bucket's rope into the well to draw water, they noticed that there was a boy inside. They rejoiced greatly and informed their companions of this prize obtained without any effort or planning. The merchants decided to sell what they had found, so they put him up for sale to a passerby who bought him for a trivial price. It seems the one who bought him was a man of power, status, and prestige, and blessed with fortune, for acquiring that boy would bring him great benefit in the days to come. Thus Joseph settled in the house of the governor of Egypt, and in that noble house Joseph lived a story. What a story! The story tells that the governor's wife became enchanted by Joseph's beauty, and after some preliminaries, asked him to commit an immoral act with her. Oh, the horror of such a request! Joseph's response was a categorical refusal, and he asked God for help to save him from this sudden temptation. But the enamored woman, who had completely lost all shame and surrendered to her desires, insisted that Joseph commit the immoral act with her. And at that moment, amid pushes and pulls, demands and refusals, the door opened, and behind it was the governor. The three stood face to face, Joseph running toward the door to escape the clutches of temptation, the panting wife behind him seeking to satisfy her desire, and the husband wanting to know what was happening in his palace. Despite this embarrassing situation, the woman rushed to accuse the palace's new guest, asking her husband to imprison him or inflict the severest punishment on him for attempting, so she claimed, to dishonor the mistress of the palace and the wife of the governor of Egypt. Faced with the woman's explicit accusation against Joseph, although she herself was the source of this temptation, Joseph could do nothing but defend himself with the truth, while she defended herself with falsehood. To uncover the truth, the governor asked some of his aides to examine from which side Joseph's tunic had been torn. After investigation, it became clear that Joseph's tunic had been torn from behind, meaning he had been fleeing the temptation. But the temptation had chased him and grabbed his garment, tearing it. This was sufficient proof of Joseph's innocence regarding the plot devised against him. Then the governor's wife and her actions became a topic of gossip among the noblewomen. The woman heard what was being whispered among them, talk spreading quietly, so she decided to act before things got worse, using all her power and influence to extinguish the flames of this scandal whose sparks were flying everywhere. She, the wife of Egypt's lord. Her scheme consisted of inviting those women to a banquet with food and drink. She offered them every delicacy, including delicious fruit served attractively. With each plate of fruit, she provided a knife for cutting it, according to the custom of the nobility. While the women were busy cutting their fruit, she asked Joseph to enter. As soon as they saw him, they were astonished by his beauty, and without realizing it, they cut their fingers with the knives. Then the governor's wife revealed the feelings of her heart and threatened Joseph, warning him that if he did not commit the immoral act with her, his fate would be prison, to taste the consequences of his refusal and suffer humiliation and subjugation. Facing this overwhelming and provocative power, Joseph found no refuge except in his Lord, imploring him to distance from him the evil surrounding him and banish the specter of temptation besieging him from all sides. God answered Joseph's prayer and foiled the deceit of that woman and the women who supported her. Then the matter concluded with Joseph ending up in prison, where another story awaited him. Joseph entered prison despite everything, preferring it to committing what would displease God. Prison became the fortress where Joseph sought refuge from temptation and its enticements, and there in prison events unfolded. That prison, every trial carries within it a gift, was the very path that led Joseph to the kingship God intended to place in his hands. Ending this arduous journey among the thorns of tribulation, Joseph stayed in prison with his cellmates, and soon earned their affection and trust thanks to the nobility of his character, the purity of his soul, the wisdom of his counsel, and the depth of his insight. He became the reference point for interpreting prisoners' dreams, and how many dreams prisoners have. One day, two young inmates asked him about the dreams they had. One had dreamed of pressing grapes to make wine, while the other dreamed of carrying bread on his head and birds eating from it. Joseph, touched by their good opinion of him, took the opportunity to offer them something greater and more beneficial than dream interpretation, an invitation to believe in God, the One, the Dominant. He began to explain God's oneness, that He alone is worthy of worship, unlike other deities that hold no power. After delivering his message of faith to the two young men, Joseph proceeded to interpret their dreams. He told the first that he would once again serve wine to his master, and he told the second that he would be crucified and birds would eat from his head. He concluded his interpretation saying, "This is what you asked me about. It is a decree of God that will inevitably come to pass." Then Joseph turned to the young man, whose liberation he had foretold, and asked him to intercede with his master, the governor of Egypt, for his release. The young man left prison, immersed himself in his affairs, met his master, and served him wine, but forgot to relay the message Joseph had entrusted to him. Then the king of Egypt had a troubling dream that gave him no peace, and none of his courtiers could interpret it. While things were like this, the former prisoner remembered Joseph. He rushed to Joseph, asked him for the interpretation of the king's dream, then returned to the king like an arrow, presenting the interpretation. The king was greatly pleased and exclaimed that Joseph should be brought to him to serve as counselor and assistant in managing Egypt's affairs. However, Joseph refused to answer the king's call, and the joy of leaving that tomb that had held him for years did not distract him from demanding an investigation into his imprisonment. He asked the king to investigate the matter, restore his reputation, and determine who was right and who was wrong. The women then appeared before the king to reveal the circumstances of Joseph's arrest. The king asked them about that event involving them and his wife. Faced with this situation, the governor's wife could do nothing but confess the truth of what had happened, informing her husband that she had been the one who asked Joseph to commit the immoral act, and that he had refused and resisted. Seeing the evidence of Joseph's innocence, purity, and noble spirit, the king wished even more to meet him, and Joseph firmly settled in his heart. In him he saw a man of wisdom, sincere counsel, and good governance, who would establish his kingdom on solid foundations. And so Joseph became close to the king, overseeing the state's economic resources and managing its revenues and expenditures. Time passed, nights and days folded into one another, while Joseph managed Egypt's economy. A famine struck the land of Canaan, where Jacob and his sons lived. Thanks to Joseph's foresight, Egypt had prepared for this event by storing much of what it had sown and harvested. Thus, during those days of drought, Egypt became the destination for all seeking provisions and food. Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt in search of food, and God willed that they meet their brother Joseph without recognizing him. They told him they were the sons of Jacob. From the moment Joseph saw his brothers, He began devising a plan between himself and them. They asked him for provisions, and he refused to give them food unless they brought with them another brother from their father's side, as proof of the truth of their claim. The sons returned to their father, and as soon as they met him, they told him they had been denied food unless they brought their brother. Jacob found no choice but to accept the situation, so he allowed them to take their brother, but made them solemnly promise to return him and not lose him, as they had lost their other brother before. Before the caravan departed again for Egypt, the father advised them not to enter Egypt through a single gate, but through different gates, fearing people's envy, for they were very handsome. The group reached Egypt again, and Joseph met his brother. He took him aside, embraced him, and told him he was his brother. Joseph had devised a plan to keep him. He instructed some of his assistants to place the king's measuring cup among his brother's belongings without anyone noticing. Everything went according to plan. And before the caravan departed, a royal herald announced that the cup had been stolen and the caravan could not leave before being searched and the thief identified. The search began, and the stolen cup was found among his brother's belongings. When Joseph's brothers saw the cup taken from his belongings, they were shocked and pleaded with Joseph to take one of them instead and release their brother, for their father could not bear losing him. But the answer was a firm refusal. The group returned with food, leaving their brother behind, confused about what to do. How would they face their father? What would they tell him? Would he believe them this time? Jacob learned what had happened and found no choice but to be patient before this disaster, submitting to God's will and hoping for his mercy and kindness. This new wound reopened an old one deep in his soul from the loss of Joseph, and now he lost his second son. Jacob persevered in his stance with his Lord, lamenting to him and standing at the door of his grace, never despairing of his mercy. He then turned to his sons, asking them to search for Joseph and his brother, urging them not to despair of God's mercy and grace. The sons had no choice but to comply with their father's request. So they prepared and headed for Egypt for the third time in search of Joseph and his brother. And here were the brothers before Joseph, pleading once more for their brother's release. Joseph saw the suffering that had struck his family and the hardship that afflicted them, and his heart softened toward them. Then he asked them, as if to reproach them, "Do you know what you did to Joseph when he was small?" The brothers were shocked by the question and asked him whether he was Joseph himself. The answer was yes. At that moment, the brothers repented for what they had done and realized they had followed a path of malice and deceit toward him. Joseph quickly turned the page on the dark past, covering all its traces with gracious forgiveness and asking for leniency regarding what had been. Then Joseph told his brothers to take his tunic and cast it over his father's face so that he might regain his sight. The caravan departed, joyful with the good news they were bringing to their father. As they approached home, Jacob announced that he could smell Joseph's scent. The sons entered and cast the tunic over his face, and he regained sight by God's will. Then they told him what had happened between them and their brother Joseph, and asked him to come with them to reunite the family. Jacob and his sons arrived in Egypt and entered before Joseph. As soon as Joseph saw his father after this long separation, he embraced him and seated him beside himself on his throne in honor. Then he turned to his Lord in prayer, thanking and praising him for the blessings he had bestowed upon him and the abundance he had granted him, asking him to let him die in the religion of Islam and join him with God's righteous servants.